Hey y'all, welcome to the Healing Space Live and Online Chats with Roxanne and Rhonda, the podcast where guests will share information and research on self-love, living a wellness-filled life, how to heal from traumatic events, and more. This podcast is sponsored by Healing Hearts and Minds Publishing, LLC, a new company that publishes books that promote self-love, healthy relationships, avoidance of unhealthy relationships, and much, much more. Check out their first publication, Unhealthy Relationships, Let's Stop the Madness, a guide for those in unhealthy relationships and for those who want to help them. Written by first-time author and co-host of the Healing Space Live and Online, Roxanne Elizabeth Epperson. Visit Amazon.com to purchase the paperback or ebook. Enjoy the show. Hi, y'all. Welcome to the Healing Space Live and Online Chats with Roxanne and Rhonda. So we are so delighted that you have taken time to spend with us this evening. It's a lovely day out, at least it is in Pittsburgh. And we hope you stay to the end, because if you do, you'll be entered into a drawing to win a door prize. So as people are coming in, we will have Amira put your name, your email address into we want you to put your email address into the chat so that she can put it into the wheel. So you'll see that a little later on. So this evening we're going to end this month with bringing it full circle with the topic of mental health. Okay, so May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and our guest this evening will share with you some serious thoughts to carry forward. So just after we introduce our guests, we're going to have a poll for you to answer. We may have a poll. We might do it a little later on, but just let us introduce our guests for right now. So Rhonda, would you like to introduce our first guest?
Thank you, Roxanne, and good evening, everyone. So I'm glad for those who are here right now, and I always believe that people here are the people that are meant to be here. We know that some people may be listening to this on a podcast, so thank you all so much for that. As Roxanne said, we are bringing May full circle. We started the month out with a clinician, Carla Adams. Big props to her for starting the beginning of May, Mental Health Awareness Month out. And today, as Roxanne said, we're going to bring it full circle. So allow me to introduce Julie Frischkorn and Devin Patterson will be introduced in just a minute. So I want to read a little bit from Julie's bio.
She would if she had it in front of her, but she don't, because I didn't.
All right. Okay, so if I don't have it, guess what I do have? I have knowledge of Julie. So let me just go from there. So first of all, you may hear me during this time to interchange Julie with Jules and Devin with Mr. D, because we all used to work together many years ago. And that's where our relationship, workship, and friendship all began. And we've actually maintained our friendship over these years. We occasionally go out for a bite to eat. Not as often as any of us want to. And then we all know the fields that we work in. It's difficult to just say, okay, this is the day we're going to do it. But there are times that we have done it. Julie is very dynamic. She is very sincere. Julie is very wise. When she was working at Women's Center Shelter, that's where we met, at Women's Center Shelter for Greater Pittsburgh, a domestic violence program in Pittsburgh, PA. And when we were working together, I was so happy and pleased for her when she said she was leaving to go get her master's degree. I was so sad and disappointed that she was leaving us at the time that she left Women's Center and Shelter to go pursue her master's degree. Since then, she has come back. She has done work for us. She did a workshop that got like 100%, which is real difficult to get, of everybody who was there enjoying and learning from. And at that time, we were just beginning to go into Zoom land and recording and, the reason for that. And we weren't so up on making sure we recorded every meeting and every training. And I got so many, and I don't think I ever told you this, Jules, but I got so many emails from staff like, did you record that? I want to listen to that again. Do we have that? And I'm like, I don't think so. Wow. So we are going to be sure to make sure we're recording this session this evening. So again, welcome, Jules. And I'm very glad that she's going to help us destigmatize mental health. And then Mr. D.
So, of course, if I don't have Jules' bio, that means I don't have Mr. D's either, right? So, so both of you can elaborate or add to whatever you want afterwards. But I do know that Mr. D is going to talk to us about the trend in mental health amongst Black males, which is critical. So, do you either of you want to add anything to your bios right now?
Well, I'll just do so real quick. So yes, like Rhonda said, we were all co-workers, and I'll just have to do a plug at this point, because even to this very day, I tend to credit Rhonda as being one of my best mentors in terms of me being where I am today. I literally, I never even heard of women sitting in shelters. So one day I was at a Walmart, and Rhonda just happened to be there. I was working at Schumann Juvenile Detention Center, and for some strange reason, I was at my wit's end, where I was tired of being in that place. Ran into Rhonda. We had known each other from church, and she said, "Hey, are you looking for a job?" And to be honest, I had no understanding of a deeper understanding of domestic violence, women's rights, and things of that nature. End up getting the job. Rhonda mentored us and the rest of the team. And I always say that, and I tend to always mention her in presentations and things of that nature. I've had 4 mentors, and she was the one that really changed, in my opinion, changed my life as a father, a husband, and as a man. I learned more there at Women's Center and Shelter than I did at any of my other previous jobs. So that's a selfish plug for just how great of a boss she was. Because she wasn't just a boss. I mean, there was times when she was a mother, she was a friend, she was a brother, she switched gears. She was all of those things to us. And I also credit her with my supervisory style, because it was so welcoming, it was so inviting. When people say things like, "My door's always open," it's a cliche. People don't really mean it. She meant it. I mean, like, literally, I could walk in there. If I had a bad day, she helped us to process those things. And her door was always open, and she protected our department like we were her babies. I mean, it was other departments, but she was very protective of the education department. Okay, first question.
Hey, much.
Well, I just want to say I consider her a mentor too, but my story is a little bit longer. We'll do that another time. But
yes, ma'am.
So, Jules, did you want to add anything? And then I do have a question.
I feel so
regarding your bio.
Yeah, just grateful to be here and share this space. I think, my connection with Rhonda and Dee starting at Women's Center and Shelter really also set me on the path for what ended up being my career in this field, which is related to trauma-informed clinical work and health equity. And so I feel super privileged to be here and to be sharing space. And
great.
Because I think this is such an important conversation.
Yes, it is. And that leads me to my first question.
Can I jump in?
Yes.
People are trying to get in.
What's wrong?
They have I'm sorry, but we just have to keep it real.
It's real. What's going on?
Trying to get in. No link on Spotify. Passcode for Zoom incorrect is what one person is saying. And the other person is saying, I've tried several times to log on, and it says the passcode is invalid.
So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into another room and let Rhonda
move on.
Yeah, you move on. Well, hold on. Since people are trying to come in, I was just going to go ahead and ask the poll question just so we can have it out there. But since people were trying to jump in, maybe you can go on to
after the poll question.
Yeah, I'll be back.
All righty. So Roxanne and I, we are just learning. As we're just learning for the Water podcast, and Zoom, it just happens. And sometimes I set up Zoom meetings and bam, everybody's there. I tried to set one up this morning. I sent in probably about 12 people. 2 people got on and they had problems. So it just happened. So she'll go work on the Zoom and we're going to just get the conversation started. But I'm not going to start with the poll question because I'd like us all to really be able to talk about that together. So I'm going to jump right in. And this is to both of you. I'll just start with you, Jules, to go first, but I want both of you to respond. And the first question is this: what defines a difficult client? And I know some people say client, patient, participant, resident. So we're going to use the word client for today. Is that okay? Is that okay? All right. So we'll use client. So how would you describe a difficult client? Because I've heard people say that, particularly when they're getting to the point where they may feel frustrated, stressed out, close to maybe even fatigue or burnout. So I've heard people say things like, I just can't take it. The clients, I'm tired of difficult clients. What define, or how did you define a difficult client? George, you want to start for us?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that question a little bit, because there's this notion of a difficult client. And I think in some ways we can all be difficult, right? Like we all have those sharp points that people can bump up against that make us challenging, or the places that are hard for us to break through. And I think that we all have, as human beings, we all develop habits. And I think one of the things that makes change the hardest for clients is if they've formed a habit over a really long period of time. Right. So if somebody has early childhood trauma and one of their habits maybe served them well to protect themselves in their early childhood, and then throughout the course of their life, it has now become a habit, and it may not serve them anymore. It may protect them, but it may not serve them. And it may make relationships difficult. Right. And so it may make the therapeutic relationship more difficult for somebody to open up or for someone to connect. And so I think I have found that with my most challenging clients over time, that it takes more time to be present with someone in order for a relationship to shift, and just a bit more patience, because habits develop, and it's just harder to change and shift.
Thank you so much. I like the fact that you started out with the fact that sometimes we're all difficult, as much as we may not think we are. We all have those moments where we're a little difficult as well. So, thanks so much for sharing. I just say real quickly that when you get grown children, they certainly will let you know that, sometimes you're difficult too, Mom. So, Dad, you think you got it all going on, but Dad, you're difficult some days. So, and with that, I'll segue to you, Devin.
That is so true. In terms of labeling or identifying a difficult client, it's been my practice and my belief that at the moment when you've identified a client who is difficult, there's something to be learned or something to be gained. So if you think about, if you're dieting, if you're exercising, if you're getting some sort of medical procedure, there's something about when it's what they call unbearable and the I can't take another step, but that's where the growth takes place. So regrettably, a lot of times, a lot of therapists walk into therapy of the mindset that it's supposed to be smooth. There's no way, if you look at therapy, it is supposed to be confrontational, because at the end of the day, we are trying to change a behavior or a pattern of thinking. And as Jules said, that's something that's not easy. I've been doing this all of my life, and now you're asking me to change it. So that is the time. It's, again, my experience is when it is the most critical learning. This is when you kind of get over the hump, or it's the breaking point. So the difficult client to me is when therapy begins, because now I'm obviously hitting a nerve, I'm hitting a chord, I'm doing something, I'm causing you to stretch. And I'm a firm believer that without challenge, there is no change. So once that challenging client comes, guess what? I'm on the brink of change, because there's no change without challenge.
Oh, okay. I like both those responses. Thank you so much.
Wow. So I have no clue how to fix the technology issue. So I've asked Amira to take a stab at it. So I'll just have to apologize, and those who weren't able to watch it, they can definitely see it later on YouTube. But so where are we at?
We are right here.
You went on and asked my questions? Because
I actually asked mine. You're up here.
Okay, so Devin. So we noticed that the field keeps on changing. The domestic violence, the mental health field keeps on changing. So what personal efforts have you made to enhance your skills or your delivery of service?
So I've always made it a point to. So first off, since I'm an LPC licensed professional counselor, I have to maintain licensure, which comes in the form of what they call continued education. So I am constantly attending conferences, reading all those books behind me, spending time going through those. As it is right now, I'm currently working on my doctorate. I'm at the dissertation stage of that. And so I am ever always looking to try to expand myself. One of the things that I learned at Women's Center and Shelter is that again, the field is supposed to continue to expand and grow. And so with that, we as ambassadors of the field, we have an obligation to move with the trends, to move with the direction it's going, and to be updated and to be informed on what's going on. So I just try to stay active with education, conferences, and things of that nature.
Jules, you can answer the same question.
Yeah, so agreed with everything that Devin said, that, I think the only true sign of an expert is somebody who's open to learning over and over and over again, right? Because we are always I think we're always on the steep learning curve to understand as therapists ourselves, because I don't think you can do good work unless you're constantly working on yourself. So kind of having my own work and then also continuing education. But something that I got certified in about 2 years ago is to be a certified mental health first aid trainer. And so with mental health first aid, I work with companies and organizations to try to support people to engage with each other, to try to reduce stigma, to try to demystify this notion of mental health so that we can talk about it more without being afraid to talk about it, so that we can support each other. We're so comfortable in talking to people about their physical health, but we become so frightened to talk to somebody about their mental health because we're afraid we're getting in their business or something like that, right? And so talking to people to begin supporting them has been one of my kind of growing edges or my areas of interest.
Yeah, I've been encouraging people in my world to get therapy, family members, friends, anybody who's dealt with domestic violence, and I share with them that I've experienced 4 therapists, and nothing. Well, one was too far away for me to get to because of I don't drive, and I really enjoyed her, and I hated that I couldn't continue on with her. And I saw one therapist. I always tell this story. People might be sick of hearing it, but whatever. The Women's Center and Shelter. I saw a therapist there, and I always say the session went so well. I don't recall ever being asked to come back. And I always say we were laughing and talking so much, I think she thought I didn't need therapy because we were just having a good old time. So I don't know, but I enjoyed that session. Then I had one therapist who wanted to put me on pills after an hour of meeting me. And I'm like, okay, that I wasn't feeling that. I've only known you for an hour and you want to throw me on meds. And I was having I had a 3-hour crying spell. Now, I just don't think that was, and it had to do with a family member and the way they were treating me and blah, this and whatever. So I just never thought that it was necessary to get on medication just because I had a 3-hour crying spell. But, and then I had one who I could just feel her energy was so negative when I went into the office. And I shared the fact that she didn't know what the ACEs study was. And that just really bothered me. I'm not a therapist, but I knew what the ACEs study was. So I didn't go to her. So what I tell people is don't give up, just keep seeking. You might have to go through a couple therapists until you find one, the right one. But, and then the one I told you about that I'm going to in Par, it was the first session, but I can tell I'm going to like her. I could feel the energy through the computer. And I also wanted to say congratulations, Devin, because even though I don't have your bio here, I did read it. and I wanted to say, and in a little while we'll be calling you Dr. D, and I love it.
Oh, yes.
So I think Rhonda, is it your turn?
Well, wait a minute. First, even before I go to it, maybe on script here, I just want to go off script for a little bit and and just say thank you all for sharing that. I don't even talk about it so much. I tried therapy once and it was unsuccessful, so I haven't gone back. So this isn't on script, but I hope y'all don't mind me going off script a minute just to ask you, how do you encourage somebody? Because how do you encourage somebody to give it another shot? Let me just give you all an example that the appointment I went to was right around the therapist, and this is no way in therapist fashion putting them. This happened one person one time. But it really leads to like something funny, but in my opinion. But I went to him for a while, and my appointment was right after his lunch period. And I remember in one session, he kind of was not nodding off. And I mean, okay, I really thought to myself, this is the funny part. I wish as he was coming out of the nod, I had to say it. But then I put the knife down and decided not to kill myself. Which was nothing near what I was saying about. And everybody, please know my heart when I make this statement. I'm not making fun of suicidology. I'm not making fun of that at all. Right. I am saying the fact that my therapist, my first time trying therapy, and the therapist actually fell asleep on me, so it was very discouraging to me. My brother has encouraged me. He encouraged me for years. My brother, who does not mind me saying, is recovering an addict. And I must always say he's over 30 years uninterrupted clean time. He makes me say the uninterrupted, which I'm very proud of. Yeah, but he said to me on several occasions, Rhonda, I don't know how you have gone through everything you've gone through and not gone for counseling. It just didn't make sense to him, right? Mm-hmm. And a brother can say that to a sister or siblings who are close to share that. But as Roxanne says, she has people she tries to tell. Devin and Jules, how do you tell somebody? What would you all say to me? How do you encourage somebody to try it again? Somebody who's had negative experiences.
Dee, do you want to go first? Do you want me to go? Okay. So first of all, Rhonda, I'm so sorry that happened to you. I just have to say those are the kind of experiences for sure that make people distrusting of therapy. When somebody walks into a therapist and feels that the therapist is either disinterested or uninformed, like you were saying about the ACEs study, Roxanne, when someone feels that their therapist is not going to get them either from a cultural perspective or an emotional perspective, or when somebody just feels like their therapist wasn't really listening to them, I think that, those are the reasons that I hear most often. And it is hard to go back, I think, and it is a risk, and it takes a lot of courage and trust, I think, to cross that. But I do think that it is, like Devin said, it's worth, I think, interviewing a few different people. I encourage people to go into the process like, hey, I'm going to kind of interview you because I'm not sure if you're the right one for me. And I'm just going to let you know what I think is most important for me and my well-being, and I'm not going to worry about you. You're a therapist. If it's not a good fit, at the end of the day, I'm just going to tell you your style wasn't right for me, and I'm going to move on to the next person. But just interview a few people and share only what you feel ready to share in that first session. Because sometimes people come in and share a lot and then feel like I have to go back because, man, I ripped off that Band-Aid big this first session, and now I don't want to go do that again with somebody else. So that's what I would encourage.
Thank you.
Yeah, and you'll probably hear this quite a few times because Jules and I keep saying I agree with each other, so I agree with everything that she just said. But the one thing that I will add is however long ago that was, we'll just say it was 10 years ago. I would just say that Rhonda is a different person than she was 10 years ago. However, there may still be an old Rhonda who is still stuck in that place, and she may need rescued in order to bring her up to where the new Rhonda is. I'm a firm believer in some of the language that I try to discourage my clients from using is like, well, especially my younger clients, because they always say things like, well, I'm a grown man. And so what I say is, well, if you're grown, then I have a problem, because what you just said is that you have ended all possibility for development and growth. You should be a growing man, a growing woman. You should never say I am grown, because that means ending. When you say, like trees, they end up being grown. They're fully developed. It's done. No more. But when you use language like I am grown, you're signifying an ending. So what I'm saying to you, Rhonda, is remember the Rhonda that had that experience, and we're using the example of 10 years ago, you've grown since that person, but you still need to go back and get her and bring her up to where the new Rhonda is. And like Jules said, regrettably, you had a bad experience with one therapist. It's just one. But again, we know how trauma works and how bad experiences work. That's enough to negate us from ever doing it again. From having a fear of, well, it's going to be the same experience it was last time. So what I'm saying is take a chance on yourself and on finding a new therapist. And like Jules said, it should be an interviewing process. Therapy does not work. I mean, they all the research says this, all of it, that the number one indication for successful therapy has nothing to do with the modality, the techniques that's used. It's the connection between the therapist and the client. That's research based. It's evidence based. That is the number one determining factor whether counseling and therapy is going to be successful. Is there being a connection between the therapist and the client, and there being a level of comfort, like Jules says, being able to share. So go out and get in the comfort zone, and find another therapist.
Thank you both.
Great.
Thank you. That's very encouraging. I appreciate it.
I got a question that has off script. So, Devin, I think I saw on your bio that you deal with clients who have experienced domestic violence, right? Do a lot of women come to you, or do they? How does that work? Do they prefer to go to them?
Great question. Hi, Janet.
Yes, hi Janet. Hey.
So to be honest with you, most of the clients that I get, females that are dealing with domestic violence, they're typically word of mouth, and so I have the advantage of, in my opinion, using and being a non-traditional domestic violence therapist. I'm a male and I'm African American, so those were the very things that I used when I was under the tutelage of Janet, who's now on the phone, and Rhonda. And so there is, I am able to connect with these clients as long as I'm able to make them feel safe, first and foremost, and comfortable. And for them, the advantage to them is that a lot of times they're able to get a male perspective of things, which kind of gives me an edge over what you would call the traditional therapist that deals with domestic violence. And so I do get a lot of clients who are referred to me for domestic violence. And then even some of the ones who are not there for that, through some digging, sometimes there are some relationship issues, some unhealthy relationships that actually end up emerging as therapy progresses.
That's why I was talking about that lady who's gonna make me cry. She's gonna start digging and finding some stuff. Tissue. You gotta have the tissue.
I hate crying, especially the kind of cry where you can't breathe the next day. I've done that. I'm like, I don't want to cry. Ooh, that was some hard crying.
That's well. Look, if I work with you and you don't cry, I might be offended. So I may start crying to get it started, just to be like, today we're just going to cry, just so you can see how it's working. I don't feel validated if I don't get a tear.
So the tears are cleansing, so it's all good. Huh?
That's awesome. Yeah.
So we were so totally off kilter here, and it's okay,
It works.
Yeah, Janet. I just so you know, we was having technical. Did you have problems getting in, Janet? You're muted. You're on mute. Oh, did she get?
He said no. The only difficulty I had was I was in a couple meetings with folks, and I'm at the church, so now I'm free and I'm on.
So where did you go? Did you just went to the War Hills podcast and clicked on that link?
I emailed it to her.
Oh, never mind.
Yeah, but I saw it on Rhonda's. I was looking for somebody on Facebook, and all of a sudden Rhonda was there advertising the podcast. I can go to that.
So this is so weird. So audience, please forgive us. We're going to figure this out. This is just our second live webinar, and I'm going to figure out this. Actually, I'm looking at another platform. It has nothing to do with Zoom or Facebook. So maybe that's what we need to do. So anyway, I don't even know where we are with the questions.
I do it right here. And as we wanted to show a video at this point, do we still want to try that with technology?
Let's just try to
More technology.
Amira's gonna show you a video, and I guess I could. So I learned about this video. I was watching the Tamron Hall show, and this there's a national movement called Confess. There's a second word to it.
Confess now or
something like that, but we'll find out on the video. And I just thought it was appropriate because of Devin's topic, and I thought we might show this video now, and hear what it has to say. We're going to attempt. Here we go. So I guess we're just having, I don't know why technology doesn't like us when we do our lives. I tell you.
Maybe it's coming. We don't have a mirror to tell us if it is or isn't.
If it is or isn't, it would pop up if and we did it. We trust me. We practiced this yesterday. That's what's so funny about it. There we go.
Barbershop's a safe place for young men of color.
Great. Thank you. I really like that. I really like this project. It reminds me of a project we did here in Pittsburgh. I don't know if it was a national project or not, but it was through the University of Pittsburgh, and they went into the barbershops talking about, and beauty shops talking about health.
Diabetes and
all of that,
pressure.
and all of that type of thing. So that was the same concept. So when I saw that, I'm like, oh, this is perfect. So we'll ask a little bit about the video a little later, but Wanda has something she wants to say right now.
Yeah. Just before I get into that, when I got my master's degree, we had to do an experiential study, and I did it at a barbershop. The atmosphere and environment of barbershops is a whole culture in and of itself. Well, I should say, I guess all barbershops, but for African Americans, for sure, it's a whole culture, But anyhow, I like that Confess project. I like that as well. So, Mr. D, we're going to focus on you for a little while. Something we call a hot seat. We're going to put you on the hot seat for a little while. Okay, Jules, you can whistle off for just a minute. All right. So, D, I want to read something to everyone, and then I'm going to ask your response to it. This is something I found when just looking for some comments and looking this subject up a little bit. And this is a statement. It says, unrealistic expectations based on gender and race often keep many Black men and other men of color out of therapy. The stereotype is that men don't even like to ask for directions. So can you imagine how hard it is to say out loud to another person, I think I need some help? Can you address this? And is it more than a stereotype or a myth?
It's interesting. I would say it is a stereotype and a myth, but I also would say that it's primarily motivated out of fear. So as a Black man, the primary lesson that I learned growing up is to show no fear, to not be afraid. And so expressions of vulnerability, emotions, is not something that was highly valued in my neighborhood. For most Black males, we oftentimes are subjugated and appreciated for two things: our looks and our physiques. Very rarely for our intellect and our emotions. I'll pose a challenge to the board, to the panel rather. I can guarantee you that you probably can't name me 3 people who are African American males who have earned academic scholarships. Now listen to what I'm saying. Here's the point I'm making. However, if you watch the news enough, you will hear about Black males who have athletic scholarships to colleges. It's on the news, it's in the paper, it's advertised. However, there's no emphasis placed on students. And I know students who have a friend of mine, his son got an academic scholarship to Brown. no news press, no recognition of that. But we can name the athletes, we can name them individuals, because even society place more emphasis again on their physique, on their physique and things like that, as opposed to their mind and their intellect. So that persona for Black males going into therapy places them in a seat of vulnerability. There's a lack of trust. I think we all can agree that based upon the climate in the country, that there continues to be a distrust in anything that's related to the system. The very system that is supposed to protect us is also this very system that hurts us. And so as a Black male, I am going to, as best I can, protect my emotions and my intellect as best I can, because people seem not to value that anyway. So it is a stereotype and a myth, but it's also primarily based on fear. So when I watch TV and I see Black male after Black male after Black male being hurt, being disrespected, and that's part of my dissertation is on Black males and trauma. So I am one of those people. I'm 52 years old, almost have a doctorate degree, but when I see the police, I don't view them as being my friend. I'm afraid, and I haven't done anything wrong, but I'm still afraid when I come into contact with them.
That was so powerful. And it leads right into the next conversation. And you started to touch on it already, Mr. D. The next one is, do you see a correlation in systemic racism with Black men not reaching out for help?
So here's something that's frightening but true. Rutgers University did a study, and in 2018, what they said was a Black male who is getting evaluated, having a psychological evaluation, if he's showing the same symptoms as his white counterpart, he's 5 times more likely to be given the diagnosis of schizophrenia versus his white counterpart, who is going to get probably, because when you're diagnosed with schizophrenia, you have to do you have to eliminate what they call mood disorders, which is depression and bipolar. So the Black male, because he's demonstrating a behavior, it's viewed as being schizophrenia. His white counterpart is diagnosed with bipolar disorder or with depression. And the difference is the treatment and the medication are categorically different. Even how they're viewed and perceived is categorically different. When you hear somebody say, oh, he's a schizophrenic, that person is treated differently than a person over here who may be suffering from depression. Totally different. And so is there systemic racism? Yes. I mean, and Rutgers study showed it. It showed when it followed, I think it was probably like 1,000 participants, 500 African-American males, 500 white males. And they seen the disparity in terms of the diagnosis. And the common denominator was symptoms were the same. The common denominator was one side that had the primary schizophrenia diagnosis with African-American, and the side that got the bipolar depression diagnosis was white.
It's, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I just want to say it's, I don't know. It's so good to hear you say that because it gives evidence. It's so painful that there's evidence to say that.
It's jacked up. Wow.
And then, I mean, and also to your question in terms of Black males having fear of going into therapy. So when you look at numerically, there's only 2% of there's only 2% of African Americans who are psychiatrists, 2% that are psychologists, around 4 to 6% that are in the social services therapy field. So out of every 100 therapists, you have 2 of them may be a psychologist, 2 may be a psychiatrist, 4 to 6 may be a therapist. And so so in going into that environment, they sometimes feel a cultural disconnect because the person sitting across from them may not be able to relate culturally, ethically, and all those other kind of things. And so it makes them afraid to be able to open up and be vulnerable.
So because of our technical difficulties and everything, we didn't get to ask the poll question. But since we do have a couple guests on now, so I think we'll do the poll question now. Do you want to launch it, Amira?
So anybody new to Zoom, as Amira pulls that up, you're going to get the opportunity to respond in the on the electronic day. So she's going to pull up a chat question. I mean, poll question for you. Okay, there it is. Actually, do you all see it?
Can you guys see the poll question?
Okay, people are answering.
Good. There's only a couple of us here, but okay. Is there a difference? Yes, everybody. Okay, great. Okay, so we can end it, and then we'll ask our guests to elaborate on. So there's 100% of the audience says there is a difference between them. So that's good. Everybody realizes that. It would have been nice to have one not sure or one no, so that we can explain to them why there is a difference. But even though they didn't, could you guys take turns and explain to us the difference?
Yeah, I'll jump in here, Dee. You know, we all have mental health, right? Every single one of us, just like we all have physical health, we all have mental health. And the distinction, I think, is so important to recognize that our mental health is simply kind of a combination of how we think, feel, and act. But mental illness is a mental health challenge or a condition, something that would be related to, oh, excuse me, Mom, listen to me. Sweetie.
I was...
Over to you, Dee.
That's funny.
Hey, look, that reminds me. I don't know if you guys ever seen. It was a political commentator. He was in his office, and his kid came in there in the baby walker, and his wife came running in the room. She slid past the kid first. She like slid past the kid and had to stop and come back. Hilarious. That was hilarious. But Joe, you might finish your answer. You were on point.
Yeah. So when we think about mental illness, that's talking about a particular condition. And I also think it's so important for folks to recognize that, you know, during our life of mental health, we will go in and out of a series of kind of mental health conditions likely, right? Because life has challenges. And so I think sometimes people worry that mental illness is sort of this death sentence or this stamp, and you never move away from it. When in reality, you will likely move in and out of different mental health challenges or illnesses throughout the course of your lifetime.
So are people still saying, oh, I'm not going to a therapist, I'm not crazy? Are they still saying those type of things?
For sure. I think stigma is real, right? And people are afraid. And I think people are afraid, like, maybe I've been struggling with something silently for so long. What if I go to the therapist and they confirm that I am struggling? And because we don't talk a lot about recovery and the possibility of recovery from mental health conditions, people are afraid that, what am I going to do for the rest of my life if I receive this stamp?
I'm so happy so many people are talking about it now, and, you know, all ages, races, and whatever. Everybody's just talking about it. Let's get this. Come on, y'all. Let's heal. That's what we're trying to heal from, this madness, you know. So, okay. So the next question, I have a question. It's for Devin and Jules. You can weigh in on the same question, and then I have a question for you afterwards. And the question to you, Devin, is, if you were able to devise a plan to address and change this negative narrative on racism. I mean, on what am I trying to say?
Men that are not getting counseling.
Men, not getting counseling, whatever. To make it more commonplace for men, Black and of men of color, to seek therapy. Could you give us maybe 3 or 4 steps that you would include?
Okay, yeah, and these are in no particular order, but I think the first thing is to have cultural competency. So research continues to show that when the therapist is able to be empathetic to the clients, that again, the connection and bond is very beneficial to the therapeutic process. So having the therapist or the clinician understand cultural differences, but also just being culturally competent and not being afraid to even I've had clients where if they were from a different culture, I would ask if it was something I didn't know or understand. Instead of trying to guess, instead of trying to formulate my own opinion, I would ask, can you further explain to me what this means to you? Just so that they can educate me. And then that way I'm not offending them by saying or doing something that's culturally incompetent. So that's the first step. The second thing that I would do is I would ensure that I would try to present and make sure that there was cultural diversity on the therapeutic line. I mean, in other words, having them see people who look like them is going to allow them to be more comfortable in going in that environment. All of us here, if you walk into a room and you don't know anybody, the first thing you look for is somebody who looks like you. We all do it. It's automatic. You say, okay, you look around, you scan the room, and you look around and say, okay, I may have something in common with this person. So, as a Black male, if I walk into a room with a bunch of people, I'm going to unconsciously look for somebody who may be African-American, maybe a male, because I'm going to feel there may be a connection or a bond there. And so that part is vitally important. Being able to have images and people who are diverse who can offer therapy. And I think as a third step is to have funding that actually does research to determine what are the most effective ways to treat people from different cultures. Because although there are continued education components, unless you really take an interest in delving into how do I treat somebody from another culture, a Hispanic, Asian, and because all of their cultures are different. So you have to address them according to their culture. Those are the three things that I would do.
Yeah. You want to add to that, Jules?
Yeah, I mean, I just think one of the things that I really value is that therapy also doesn't have to be the only inroad for mental health, right? Therapy is one inroad, but I love the project with the gentleman in the barbershop because he was saying there are other places where we can talk about mental health. There are other places where we can build community and bridge stigma, and a therapist might be one of those places, but there are so many other inroads that are super valuable. And so I think also allowing people to be where they need to be in their own journey.
That reminds me of, even in my situation, I'm nowhere near a therapist, but I'm always telling my story of survival from domestic violence and sexual assault and rape. And I found that telling my story is actually helping other people. And one woman reached out to me and said that she thanked me for talking to them about my story. And she's now seeking a therapist because she's 40 years old and she's never she just told her mother that she was raped in high school, So yeah, I've been called a non-traditional therapist because I have no titles. So even when Devin called himself non-traditional, I'm not his kind of non-traditional because he got skills
and degrees.
and degrees. So I'm a different kind of non-traditional therapist. But yeah,
get a lot of money for them with the pieces of paper on the wall. So at the end of the day, it's an expensive piece of paper.
Okay, well, yeah, hopefully you'll get a little break from the government. They're going to knock a couple dollars off of it. She said that's a joke, right? So I have another question for you, Julie. Where do you draw your motivation? And I hope you didn't answer this when I was out of the room already. Okay, where do you draw your motivation to offer quality care and support to your clients at all times?
That baby girl that just ran up in that room. There's her motivation.
I'm so daily motivated by my friends and family and other therapists and colleagues in the field. But I'm also motivated by the current state of mental health in our country, right? And how much inequity there is in terms of race and in terms of gender and sexual orientation and class. Access to good quality mental health care isn't just capped by things like stigma. It's capped by things like transportation and where the offices are. You know, we really saw such a shift in so much of that during the pandemic, when people were able to see their therapists in all different online spaces too. It increased equity to an accessibility rather, but it also meant you had to have a computer and you had to have an internet and good internet. I mean, just I'm motivated daily by, things are moving in a positive direction, but we still have so far to go in the field of mental health, I think.
Julie, you just reminded me to say something that, right now Uber is given, and somebody here might know the exact number. I think it's like 1 million rides or something. Spike Lee does the advertisement on television for anyone who may have seen it, but they're giving a million or some large number of rides for people to get the vaccine, because that's what the country needs right now. Wouldn't it be awesome for them to continue to give rides for people who need therapy but can't get there? That would be really good for Uber or someone else, Lyft or somebody else, to take that on. Like, okay, if you can't, get to your therapist, here, we're going to provide you with a free ride for at least 6 sessions. I'm not saying they have to do it for 6 years, but for 6 sessions, we're going to give you a chance to get to your therapy. So
yeah, I could have used them when
you got lost. Yeah. She got lost when she went to that one. It was out far.
It was far, and I was standing out, and I have no clue where I was, and I was standing on the corner crying like a baby. And to this day, I still don't know how I managed to get back or figure it out. But I said, "Oh God, I couldn't go through that again." But that's good, guys. So.
Devin says something that really, and Julie, both of you, because you're both so on the same plane. I really, really love it. But I remember many, many years ago, a cousin of mine went to counseling, and she needed a washer at that time. And the therapist said, well, how are you going to get the washer? She said, well, I'm going to pray about it. And the therapist laughed at her. And she quit. She never went back. Maybe this is in my family. I don't know. Happened to me, happened to my cousin. But, talking about being, both of you have addressed being culturally aware and knowing how to address people from cultural differences. And also, like you're saying, it's an interview process. So like from how you responded to me, it's the interview process. So knowing your own comfortability with someone saying back to you, I don't think this is going to work because, and they have to have their own reason how they fill in the blank, But I think that makes it more welcoming also for them to realize that, you are the expert, but you don't wear a halo while you're in the session saying I'm the expert, so you show that through your acceptance and in your in interactions with them. So, yeah. Okay. So we're coming close to a close, but before we do, also want to ask you, just do you think it's okay to have a practice that is to a specific group? So maybe to have a group specifically to African-American men, sessions or therapy that promotes oneself specifically to African-American males, specifically to the LGBTQ plus community, specifically to people with disabilities. Do you think it's okay? Or is that bringing a discrimination when somebody wants to have a practice to a specific group? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, you can't, especially if you're billing through insurances, like I know I do and Jules used to. You can't necessarily advertise that way in terms of just saying that you are only working towards a specific group of people. And again, that's if you're licensed and credentialed under like UPMC, Highmark, Aetna, Cigna. Now, what you can do, there's questionnaires you have to fill out where you identify specialty groups. So what I do, when I fill out my application, I do say that I will work with LGBT, I will work with people of different faiths, sexual orientation, domestic violence, African American, even different age brackets. So what happens is when a person is trying to seek a therapist, and he or she's saying, I want a specific therapist, they're then able to, the algorithm is able to point them towards that particular therapist who falls within the needs that they want. So, like, for example, my phone rings off the hook because once they say I want an African-American therapist, the list goes from here to here. I mean, you know what I mean? Like it's a very small circle of Black males, at least in the city of Pittsburgh, who are doing therapy. And so so that's the extent that you can do it. But a lot of times, even with me, my clients are again word of mouth. So a lot of my clients are African Americans because it's word of mouth. But I do constantly get referrals and calls from the UPMC, Aetna, Stigma, Highmark, etc.
Thanks for telling me that.
Yeah.
I like that anyone can check box what you can do. But thanks for that. It makes sense. I remember one time calling whoever my insurance was at the time and asking for African American, I think dermatologist, and they couldn't tell me by ethnicity if there was an African American dermatologist. So I didn't go.
Well, I was looking for an African American dermatologist because I went to their for years trying to deal with this issue I still have. So I said, well, maybe there's something culturally going on in my skin. There's something I didn't know what was going on. So I said, well, and I Googled it and I did find one.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
In Pittsburgh?
Yeah, Shadyside.
Cool.
Shadyside Dermatology. So anyway, we got maybe one or two more questions. So you kind of alluded to this a little bit during the discussion, but I want to ask it again. If both of you guys can tell us why you chose to go in to become a mental health therapist, and based on the video, do you think there's an advantage if African American parents would seek help for their sons at a younger age? And that's for both of you.
I'll talk maybe about why I became a therapist or why I went into the field of mental health. When I was a teenager, I went through a really difficult time, a really dark time with depression and anxiety. And it was very scary and I felt very alone and I really struggled. And sort of as a last option, my family didn't really know much about mental health, but as a last option, my mom was like, maybe we'll take you to see a therapist. And I was like, I'm not going to a therapist. I'm not crazy. I'm not going on medication, all of those things. And I was probably 15 or 16 years old maybe. And she was just like, please just try. And I went, and this person changed my life. I didn't think I could, life was worth living. I didn't think there was hope or there was possibility. And I was able to see that there was a different way and that somebody could listen to me and, validate my experience. It was so powerful. And, a number of other things also influenced me. But as I was thinking about this today, I think that was probably one of my most formative experiences, is to be able to walk on the journey with other people the way that somebody was able to walk on the journey with me, to say that it can be different. It doesn't have to be this way.
That's amazing. It's amazing to me how we go through what we go through and then we turn it into a career. Because that's the same with me, the abuse that I endured. Now I'm doing domestic violence work. And I believe you can't do this type of work unless you've experienced it. So
I disagree with that.
Well,
I do.
Well, I'll say this. I don't know why. I'm gonna ask her why she disagrees.
Now, let me say real quickly for the audience. I think, this is how I answer that question when people say that. I never had cancer, but I watched my mother, thank God, but I watched my mother go through it. Okay. So I can have an empathy and understanding, and I can learn from that, and I can teach from that place because I have compassion. So I think I can teach and share from my compassionate side, but I don't have to have gone through I don't think every therapist has gone through everything that they support somebody through.
Well, I'll agree with you with that, because I feel the same way about parenting, teaching parenting.
Yeah, see?
I'm not a parent, but common sense tells me that's not how you do it. So I do, there's certain things but there's certain things that I would not have touched because I'm not a parent. I don't have that experience, and but yeah. So, okay, Devin.
So I'll answer the second part of the question first, about parents sending their children to mental health services. So Frederick Douglass said, "It is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men." Mm-hmm. So, in answer to your question, yes, emphatically, because by the time they come to me, typically, and I do work with young kids and teenagers, but by the time they come to me, they're a broken man. And had someone intervened earlier when they was a child, and they saw fit to get them some help, they could have built a strong child. And not to say that they wouldn't have had any mental health issues, however, but it is much easier to work with them from that aspect when they're younger and impressionable versus when they're a man and they've had life and experiences that have sometimes clouded their ability and their desire to change. So yes to your question. Now the other part in terms of how I got into the mental health profession, and I don't know if I've ever shared this with either Rhonda or Jules. I mean, but I may have, but this is a real personal one. So on December 15th, 1990, I was a senior in college, and I was working part-time, and I was at work, and I came back to the dorm, and at that time, you know, before technology and you had cell phones, we were using payphones. So the payphone was in a hall. It was a community payphone in a hallway. So I had like 5 or 6 messages from home, which was again unusual. Normally it'd be 1 missed call from home, and that'd be that. So it was like five missed calls from back home. So I go and I call my mom. I'm like, hey, I got all these messages. What's going on? Is everything okay? And she had told me that my father had committed suicide. So that was just like Jules said, that put me in a very, very dark space for a long period of time. And so because I wanted to understand why he took his life and understand more about suicide, that was the very thing that catapulted me into the mental health profession, wanting to get answers for why my father took his life. And then for me, the thing that made this more heart-wrenching was my father had 5 children. I'm the middle child. And so he left, and excuse me for saying this, but my father, what he did was he slit his wrist and he hung himself. But so they found an envelope, a post office envelope that I still have with his blood on the back of it. And it says, I make my son, Devin Patterson, beneficiary of my insurance. And the thing that was deep to me was, out of all of his 5 children, I was the one that he was thinking of when he was taking his last breath. And so, and I will never forget, I came home from college, and at that time, Sir Weck was still the coroner. And I remember me and my cousin going down there, and him handing me the box and just saying, I'm very sorry for your loss. It's a tragic thing. I mean, he wasn't as impersonal as I thought he would have been. But all that to say, that was the very thing that kind of pushed me into the mental health profession. And so since then, that's been one of my primary areas of practice and focus. As a sidebar note, it's interesting that at least in the Black community, suicide was always viewed as something that we never did. But interestingly enough, from 1980 to 1995, there was 146% increase in suicides in the Black community between children from the adults between the ages of 18 to 24. And so now, and you even heard in the video it was mentioned, which is still true, it is now the 3rd leading cause of death between people between the age of African-American males between the age of 19 and 24. So that's always been one of my areas of expertise and passion there.
I see a book out of both of y'all. So if you haven't started, you don't even have to write it. Just dictate it to Word on your computer.
My dissertation is my book. I'm already writing it.
There you go.
It's 80 pages long, by the way. Oh my God. Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay. That's how many pages my book is. About 80 pages. It's not a dissertation. It's just a book.
Not just, it is your first book.
My first book.
Yes, it is.
So, Rhonda.
Yeah, Devin, thank you so much for sharing that. Jules, thank you so much for sharing that also. I'm really not even going to look at my notes because it's just going to come from my heart. That when I think of Roxanne and I go back and forth with who we're going to have for this week, who we're going to get, and Roxanne's like, what's Mental Health Awareness Month? We have to do something. I said, I got somebody to ask, Roxanne. And my heart is overwhelmed with joy. And I'm just so thankful and grateful. And I can't think of two better people to have teamed up for a panel. And we sometimes want 3 people on the panel. And Roxanne was going to ask someone, we don't have to go into what did or didn't happen. But Roxanne said, you know what, we could just go with it with 2. I'm like, oh, with these 2, we sure can.
And it worked.
It did. So you all have fulfilled everything that we have asked and more. I am so, so grateful. Thank you both. And I know there's not a lot, we know a lot of people hear this later on Pandora and Spotify and Apple Podcasts, so they're hearing it more so than looking. But I'm looking at the screen, and I'm just going to put a plug. I want to thank everybody who's here. It's only a very few people. We got a couple of text messages. People had technical difficulties, but we're going to push through. Roxanne and I, we have a panel with 2 people and only 1 person, so we're going to push through. That said, there's 2 people here today that I want to mention. One is Janet. As we mentioned in our introduction, that Julie and Devin and I worked together at Women's Center and Shelter. So did Janet. So Janet is here on the screen with us. And then the other person I want to give a shout out to is Patrice is on the screen as well. Patrice is one of my best friends, my sorority sister. And I just want to give a plug that keep your telephones on, keep your laptops ready, because you know we're going to invite the 2 of you, because Roxanne and I, we don't know when, and we don't know if it'll be before October, which is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, but we definitely want to have a conversation where we talk about domestic violence in the church. So we know that Janet and Patrice can be 2 guests for that topic. So again, it might not be until October when we do Domestic Violence Awareness Month, but we don't have any limitations to what we're going to talk about and what we're going to share. So I'm going to read a prayer, and then Roxanne's going to do our final closing. But I'm going to read a prayer for this part of closing that was submitted to me by another sorority sister, my friend, my sorority sister, Jolynn Parham. And I'm going to share this because when she saw the invite that we were talking about mental health, she said, I just got this in my email today. Wow. And this is what it says: Mental Strength Monday. Father God, in the name of Jesus, we come before you today, praying for mental and emotional strength to stand on your word when we face trials and tribulations. Lord, please help us to meditate on your word day and night. So when situations arise in our lives, we have the mental strength to remind ourselves of what your word says. Lord, even though difficult situations can cause us anxiety, doubt, stress, and worry, we cannot allow these things to control our lives. Lord, give us the mental strength to keep our faith and the peace of mind to trust you no matter what the situation is. Lord, help us to release every burden to you so we don't feel overwhelmed by the pressures, stresses, and strains of life that we have no control of. Please be with each of us, giving us wisdom and knowledge so our mental strength will grow and we will become wiser and more prepared to face life's challenges and difficulties. Lord, give us the mental strength to overcome fear and worry, and help us to keep the faith and remind ourselves of your promises in your word daily. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. My final thought and comment to that is, to all my Christian fellow sisters and brothers, and to all of us, we have therapists for a reason. So do not let your Christianity or whichever religion stand in the way of you getting and seeking the mental health that you deserve. Thank you all. Thanks for joining us. And Roxanne?
Yeah, I'll just ask our guests if you would put your email address in the chat. So we'll have a drawing later on, and we'll let you know tomorrow who won the $25 gift card. So see, I hate that other people weren't able to join us, but you know, it is what it is. And we want to remind you to, this podcast is, we do a podcast every Thursday at 5:00. And the fourth Thursday or the last Thursday of the month will be our live panel discussions. And so our technology is working well on the audio side. We have to get this Zoom or this piece together it's going to work out. And we also want to, like I said, we're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, and there's other platforms, but there's too many platforms to name, but those are like the big dogs. So you can find us on there, and you can also watch us on YouTube. So this will be uploaded by, what's today? Thursday, probably by Saturday or Sunday. This will be uploaded where you can watch it on YouTube, and we need you to watch it on YouTube. And even if you don't watch it, just have it in the background doing your dishes or whatever. Yeah, because we're trying to get monetized. So Rhonda laughed at me last time because you have to have 1,000 likes, 4,000 views before it becomes monetized. So far we have 2 views on YouTube.
We're getting there.
We have a long way to go. Rhonda said, well, I need to call some family and friends. So if you could do that for us, we would appreciate it. Watch us, like us, share, and subscribe. And we thank you for joining us. And we want you to have a safe holiday weekend. And don't forget, we got your back. Thank you, guys.
You,
Bye.
Bye-bye. There are 2 things we would like you to do. Number 1, enter our monthly drawing by sending your email address to info@warheals.org. Spelled out, that is info@WARHEALS.org. Put drawing in the subject line. We will notify the winner or winners via email by midnight on the last Thursday of each month. Our second request, engage with us on IG. Follow, like, and subscribe to all of our social media platforms at warheals_ on IG, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. WAARHEALS_ on IG, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. As always, we thank you for listening and see you next week.